You can tell in a matter of seconds that Okami is one of the most amazing-looking PlayStation 2 games ever released. But the good news is it's got a lot more to it than just those pretty graphics. This is an action-adventure game based on Japanese mythology. In it, you play as Amaterasu, which is the Japanese goddess of the sun, embodied in this game in the form of a wolf. And her job is to rid medieval Japan of this evil presence that's swept over the entire nation. So thus begins a really epic adventure that takes you across all far corners of Japan, battling all kinds of strange and interesting foes, and using a variety of pretty unorthodox techniques where you're literally painting miracles into existence. Okami is just a class act all the way. It's an amazing looking game, it's got a fantastic soundtrack, it's got some really novel gameplay to it, it's got really just inspired character designs to it, and just about the whole experience is enjoyable. And on top of that, it's a really long game, clocking in at more than 30 hours from start to finish. Since the story of the game is based on folklore, it's really your traditional good versus evil plotline. Amaterasu has to come in and basically purge this evil fog from the land by rejuvenating the forestry, feeding the wildlife. It's kind of got this hippie undertone to it, but don't worry, there's plenty of good old-fashioned combat against weird, ugly, hideous, nasty-looking demons, and plenty of high adventure as well as you're going through lots of dungeons and just exploring a really vast countryside. It helps that you're playing as a wolf who's capable of running really, really fast once she picks up a little momentum. Amaterasu is joined at the beginning of the game by this pint-sized character named Isun, who does all the talking for the two of them. He's kind of this smart alecky little guy, but he's helping her along, and he's able to communicate with all the townspeople, whereas she's just a wolf. Actually, she's not just a wolf. She has a lot of pretty amazing powers, most notably the Celestial Brush, which allows her to paint these miracles into existence. It's a pretty cool and well-done play mechanic. You just press and hold R1, and out comes this brush onto the screen as the whole screen seems to turn into a piece of parchment, and you just draw these simple patterns that cause a variety of things to occur, such as slashing your opponents clear in two, or creating a large bomb that blows everything up. But they're not just all destructive. Some of these powers restore plants to life and turn night into day. There are more than a dozen different brush techniques in all, but you're not going to have all of these at the beginning of the game. In fact, throughout most of the game, you're acquiring more and more of these as you go. You're also gaining access to other combat abilities, you're getting more resilient to damage, you're finding new weapons. This is all happening as you're exploring this really big world, primarily on foot. You can run around from place to place, the environments seem really quite vast. The world of the game really feels full of just things to do, things to see, and it helps that all the while the game is just so vibrant looking, especially once you've restored all the nice greenery to the scene. Okami is a surprisingly long game, and that length doesn't come from you getting stuck in spots or having to replay battles over and over or anything like that. If anything, the game is probably a little on the easy side. The combat tends to not be particularly challenging. It's very possible that you'll get all the way from the beginning to the end without ever running into a game over screen, and that's probably mostly a good thing, actually. There's some occasionally challenging puzzles, but it's not anything that's going to make you tear your hair out. It's really just there to add variety to the game. Interestingly enough, a lot of the combat in the game is actually avoidable. You'll see these weird floating talismans as you're exploring the world, and these represent gangs of monsters that you could fight if you run into these talismans, but you could just run around them if you'd prefer to and just keep going wherever it was you're trying to go. So if you'd rather play this as more of a story-driven experience where you're kind of talking to characters and taking in the whole world, you can do that. But you are still going to have to fight the game's various boss monsters, which are very big, very cool looking, not necessarily all that difficult, but definitely fun to fight. It's not very often that a game comes along that not only looks totally amazing and one of a kind, but also has a lot of novel gameplay to it and lasts a long time for good measure, but Okami is really such a game. This is a game that you could highly recommend to just about anyone with a PlayStation 2, especially if they're at all predisposed to Japanese mythology or folklore or anime or anything like that. Even if you're not, there's a good chance you will be by the time you're through playing this game.